In a sensational development, RBI Governor Urjit Patel stepped down from his post earlier this evening. Issuing a brief statement, the RBI Governor cited personal reasons for this sudden move.
Urjit Patel's resignation comes in the backdrop of a series of rifts between the centre and the Reserve Bank of India over a number of contentious issues, one of which includes the government wanting access to RBI's reserves.
Reactions have been pouring in since the announcement.
The government deeply acknowledges the great services that he has rendered to India, its economy, in several capacities, more particularly as the Governor of the Reserve Bank and the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank.
In my opinion, his resignation at this time would be wrong for the government, would be wrong for the economy, wrong for the Reserve Bank.
While Prime Minister Modi tweeted that we will miss him immensely, the opposition, on the other hand, attacked the government over the resignation of the RBI governor.
The RBI chief has resigned because he can no longer work with the current government.
Probably Urjit Patel found himself cabined, crimped, confined, bound in, not having enough space to take independent decisions, being the subject of attack by the finance ministry, by the government.
Mirror Now asks, was Urjit Patel pushed into a corner to resign as the RBI chief? The debate begins now.
Good evening. As you'll remember, viewers, we've been tracking this entire movement between the RBI and the Government of India for the last 1 month. There were rumours in the last board meeting that the RBI Governor Urjit Patel would resign. But then we had a conversation about how the government and the RBI might have found a middle ground. That middle ground seems to have run out today when Urjit Patel unceremoniously announced his departure to the press. In his note, he thanked his colleagues at the RBI and the other directors of the RBI board, but there was no mention of the finance minister or the government or anyone else in the government. Normally, it is customary for the RBI governor to mention and thank the finance minister and to talk about what it was like to work with him in his parting note. But in this case, it was conspicuously missing. The finance minister, though, in his note did acknowledge the RBI governor's contribution and did mention the fact that it was a pleasure to work with Mr. Patel. What went wrong? And more importantly, what kind of damage control is the government going to do starting tomorrow? Remember, the markets are going to react. The global banks and other investors are going to react to this. And of course, the idea that the government is interfering with institutions that should be independent of government is something that will dig its heels in even further. Not to mention the fact that just tomorrow morning will be the beginning of the winter session of Parliament, and it is likely that the opposition will make this a key issue going into that winter session of Parliament. Joining me on this show this evening, Bhaskar Ghosh, representative of the BJP, Sunil Alagh, founder and chairman of SKA Advisors, Mohan Guruswamy, senior economist and chairperson of the Centre for Policy Alternatives, Sugatha Ghosh, associate editor for the Economic Times, Professor Aman Agarwal is an economist, Santosh Mehrotra, professor of economics at JNU, and Vinay Tiwari, consulting editor of the Times Network. I welcome all of you to this conversation and I thank you for your time. I will start with Mohan Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, thank you for joining us. Do you believe right now the damage control that the government is going to have to do, or the management the government is going to have to do in this particular instance should be top of mind? How do you think various economic parties are going to react to this resignation? I'm not sure if Mr. Guruswamy can hear me. I'll take the question to Professor Mehrotra. Professor Santosh Mehrotra, your reaction first of all to the news that the RBI governor had quit, and what do you think is going to follow now?
Well, first of all, it is a very sad day for the relations between the government and an independent RBI, as it should be, an independent central bank. For a country which claims to be the 6th largest economy in the world, which has the 3rd largest economy in purchasing power parity terms, I think we cannot do without an independent central bank. And Governor Patel's claim that he's resigning for personal reasons, I think no one really seriously believes that. Raghuram Rajan doesn't believe that. C. Rangarajan doesn't believe that. These are two former governors. I know Mr. Malik doesn't believe that. So it is, what can I say other than the fact that this is an extremely sad day?
But do you believe that I mean, we've seen the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister put out statements that are very complimentary of Urjit Patel. And Urjit Patel's statement was not complimentary. Do you see that as a hint of something of what might have actually gone down?
Without a doubt. I think his statement, if anyone who reads it carefully, will tell you that this was not, as Mr. Mehrotra said, resignation out of a personal reason. There is obviously something more to it. And when I say more to it, I'll probably will have to wear a speculative hat to say that it was perhaps the government taking a decisive action because they're not getting their way. Obviously, Mr. Urjit Patel was handpicked by them, but at some stage, his professionalism or the ability or the arrogance or arrogance being a negative word, but the idea of being a technocrat and a specialist brings with itself certain knowledge and certain whatever, which was finding it difficult with the government. The government, this is not a government that takes disagreement very well. It's very obvious. And that's where I think the claustrophobia perhaps began, and he had to leave. It's very obvious that there is a mixture of claustrophobia plus pressure from the government, which he decided not to take anymore. Clearly, when relations break down to that level, there is no other way but to exit that place. And that's what perhaps has happened.
So, Gatha, the last conversation you and I had was about the fact that the RBI and the government or the finance ministry have found a way to talk things through, and that's a good thing. Obviously, that didn't last very long. What do you think the flashpoint was, or what have you heard so far?
Well, what I pick up is that in that Committee of Boards meeting last week, the government made it very clear that they would be insisting on the governance agenda in the 14th board meeting. Simply put, it means that the RBI board will have a primacy. The RBI board will be like a corporate board, and the governor is like the CEO. Now, you are trying to bring about a governance overhaul of an 80-year-old institution, where the role of the RBI governor and the board would change forever.
Yes.
Perhaps he couldn't, it was becoming unsustainable.
But, forgive me for interrupting you a second, but former Finance Minister Mr. P. Chidambaram is on the phone line with us right now. Mr. Chidambaram, thank you for speaking with Mirror Now. This is Faye D'Souza from the studios in Mumbai. Yeah. You've tweeted already your reaction to the resignation of the RBI governor. You believe that it's more than what meets the eye?
Of course. He should have resigned at the last meeting when they humiliated him and told him to get ready for the next meeting and laid out an agenda which would have converted the RBI into a board-managed company. And I've written about it. The decisions announced by the RBI, if you closely look at the language, except in one case, the matters were decided by the board.
Yes.
Now, when the board decides to decide matters rather than advise, it's already a board-managed company. And why should a self-respecting governor of a central bank report to a board-managed company? That destroys the very independence of a central bank. It destroys the very character of a central bank. Central banks world over means governor. Central bank equals governor. If they're going to convert it to a board-managed company, why should anyone remain governor?
Mr. Chidambaram, a lot of the economists we've spoken to through the last several hours have told us that the biggest challenge right now will be to protect India's credibility in the global market. Do you believe that this resignation in any way will hurt India's credibility?
Our credibility took a big knock in 2016, November 8. I don't think Dr. Patel has been able to salvage that damage in the last couple of years. Now, what happened in the last 6 to 8 weeks, to some extent, salvaged his personal reputation, but has more severely damaged the RBI's reputation. I don't think anyone seriously believes that the RBI is an independent central bank anymore. And if at the next meeting there is a new governor, and the new governor plays along with the government and allows the board to manage the RBI, that's the end of RBI's history as an independent central bank.
Well, that was going to be my next question, Mr. Chidambaram. The alleged interference of the government of India into various institutions that are meant to maintain their independence. We've had previous situations where RBI governors and finance ministers, yourself included, have had differences of opinion on the way forward on various decisions. Why do you believe that four economic advisors of this government at various positions have quit before their term?
Don't even compare what happened with previous finance ministers and previous RBI governors. Don't even compare that. The comparison is completely unacceptable. Read Dr. Y.V. Reddy's book, Advice and Dissent, chapter 26 or chapter 28, where he devotes a whole chapter to his relations with me. Show me one sentence on that chapter which points to a breakdown of relations. In fact, that chapter explains and elaborates on how finance ministers and RBI governors have genuine differences and how they are resolved. What is happening today is a scandal. It's a spectacle. So don't even compare the past with what's happening now. What's happening now is an attempt to capture the RBI in order to capture the reserves of the RBI. If they cannot capture the RBI, they wanted to overawe the governor through the board, through their nominees on the board.
Right. Mr. Chidambaram, last question. Mr. Arvind Subramaniam has also made a statement saying we as a country need to brace for an economic slowdown for the next several months because of the financial sector and the agricultural sector. Do you agree with him?
I've been saying this for weeks now, months now. It's good that people are beginning to speak up now. We've had a series of people speaking up. General Huda, outgoing Chief Election Commissioner O.S. Rawat, Arvind Subramanian, now Arvind Subramanian calling the Niti Aayog excessive claims to ability. I mean, good that people are speaking up. But I wish they spoke up when they were in office. If Arvind Subramaniam had spoken up when he was in office and he was not consulted on demonetization. Please remember, numerous interviews, that one question he ducks is where you consulted on demonetization. You know, it may have halted this government in its tracks, but I doubt it. This government is a reckless government. It doesn't understand economics. It doesn't care about the economic well-being of this country. So they will do anything. In fact, the intention of the government will be revealed when they announce the next governor. Who the next governor will be will conclusively prove what the government's intentions are.
Okay, Mr. Chidambaram, thank you for your time. I appreciate the time you've given us here on Mirror Now. I wish you a very good evening. P. Chidambaram, therefore, the former finance minister, giving us his point of view on the RBI governor's resignation. Remember, he did say this was a spectacle and it shouldn't be compared to any of the previous instances of, sort of disagreements between RBI governors and finance ministers. Let me bring this back to my panel at this point. First of all, Bhaskar, do you agree with him, Saugata, that it shouldn't be compared with any other situation?
It's
to
right.
some extent?
I mean, those differences never made it to the headlines.
Yes.
But this is a situation where you have a look. Urjit Patel by no means is the greatest RBI governor. Let's accept that. Now we have a weak central bank and we have a very strong center. So that imbalance had to culminate in this kind of a situation.
Replacing him is also going to be a challenge because who's going to want the job?
Yeah, someone
it's already a contentious and a difficult position.
Someone who is accepted by the government as well as admired by the world and financial markets, it will not be easy.
It will not be easy.
But what happens from now also depends on what happens. The outcome of the elections would determine that. If BJP fares badly, it may not push some of the agenda.
Okay.
I tend to believe. That's a bet I would like to
Can they economically afford not to push the agenda? Hang on. Let me just bring in Mohan Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, if you can hear me right now, and if you heard Mr. Chidambaram, he said this is a spectacle, shouldn't be compared to other instances, and he said for sure that he believed that we are going to go through an economic slowdown. Your point of view, Mr. Guruswamy?
Well, this tussle with wanting to micromanage the RBI has been going on for some time, just not with this government, but even with the previous government. But there was one fundamental difference. In the previous government, you had, as Prime Minister, a person who was a governor of the RBI and a finance minister, who understood the tensions and the fine balance between the two institutions in the country. And so, you know, remember Venugopal Reddy has written that he went to see the Prime Minister regarding various things from time to time. And so he had the support of a complete establishment in Delhi, and which could balance off the demands of the finance ministry. Right now, you have a government which thinks that the RBI should be a department of the finance ministry. And it should be run from the finance ministry according to their dictates. And that is the fundamental. And there's also another big difference coming up now. There is a basic philosophical difference. RSS thinks about how an economy should be managed and how sane people with experience in government and finance think an economy should be managed. The discipline which the RSS is trying to impose is totally different. The RSS, for instance, believes that no foreign capital is needed in this country and that you can manage on your own. The RSS believes that all Indian companies should be Indian-owned. The RSS believes that, you know, RBI's job is to print money and keep giving it to NBFCs and other people as and when demanded. So, you know, their notions of fiscal prudence and balancing an economy are totally different. You heard, we had a brief glimpse of the taxless, income taxless regime they promised before they came to power last year. You know, with this Arthashastra, what's it, Pune group coming up with some kind of zany ideas. It was given a big boost by the RSS, and this Prime Minister sat and listened to them. Demonetization is a gift of that think tank. And so, you know, there is, and right now, if there are difficulties tomorrow as a result of the politics, this government will try to push its agenda because the RSS believes that the government has failed because it has not pushed the RSS agenda on the economy. There are fundamental differences coming up here.
Let me bring in the other side of the argument, Mr. Guruswamy, if I may.
Western educated.
If I may for a second, Bhaskar Ghosh represents the BJP here. Bhaskar Ghosh of the BJP, there is a fair amount of criticism that the government is going to come under for several reasons. One, interfering with the RBI, putting pressure on the RBI governor until he quit, perhaps interfering with institutions that should stay independent of the government. And of course, you heard Mr. Guruswamy. What is your response to all of these, all of these complaints?
Yeah, first of all, I was just hearing what our ex-finance minister was passing remarks that this government has done nothing and there's a careless government. But let me remind you that in 2014, when the last government has left, the GDP was 4%, and today we are at 7.1%, and some time back it went to 7.5. So the question is that the government till now has never interfered into any autonomy of any institutions. But end of the day, I believe the government is accountable to the larger mass because it is not selected, it is an elected government. One, it is an elected government that it has to also see the different modalities which is decided by the cabinet on time to time, and the different institution who is supporting the government in order to implement their political and financial...
That's true of all governments. You're not answering my specific question. What you're saying is true of all governments.
So that's, we never interfered. Even if I quote unquote Honorable Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, in the last meeting where there was a difference of opinion, he said the meeting was prolonged for a couple of hours, and it had ended with a vote of thanks, and everything was
Mr. Ghosh, the meeting would have ended with a vote of thanks, but now we have a resignation from the governor of the RBI 1 day before the state elections come in, results come in, 1 day before the winter session of Parliament, a few months before the next major election. So I don't believe it's fair to say that meeting ended with a vote of thanks and everybody was happy, because obviously they were not.
That again, if you see on record, the governor himself said it's in personal reason. Governor has not protested against any of the government decisions.
No, hang on. So, Bhaskar Ghosh, what is your explanation of the fact that Urjit Patel has not mentioned the finance minister, has not thanked him, has not thanked the government for for the opportunity?
No, but first of all, as an RBI governor, he is more thankful to his colleagues. And don't forget that he was not been planted from external sources. He was a deputy governor of RBI for a long time. He was throughout the career he was with RBI.
So Bhaskar Ghosh, are you saying that the government had absolutely nothing to do with this
during the critical time?
The line you're taking tonight is that this was a personal reason and the government had nothing to do with it.
Do you remember? First, do you remember during the demonetization, this Dr. Urjit Patel has given so many statements that he supports the demonetization, he supports the GST. So whatever is the government's policies, he never opposed the government policies. But see, between two organizations, between two institutions, always there could be a difference of opinion.
Okay, all right. But so Bhaskar Ghosh, explain this to me.
Have a linear thoughts that
Okay, explain this to me. This is not one or two, but the fourth such senior economic position in the government of India who has quit before his term ended. This is and for someone to have quit, since 1990 we haven't had an RBI governor leave 1 year before his term ended. So if you're going to run with the idea that they had a great relationship and this was possibly a personal reason, then I am going to bring in the other members of my panel, because then there's no point going down that line of thought. But Sugata, if you could just explain to our audience, when we say that the government obviously wanted to turn this, to turn the RBI into a CEO-run company, what is the difference? What is the difference between what should ideally happen now, and a CEO-run company? And why would that upset the governor?
Well, many of these crucial decisions, like the NPA circular earlier this year, then the prompt corrective action restricting loans to weaker banks, many of these decisions were taken unanimously by the government, by the RBI, without bringing them to the board. The board members came to know of it from the media. So that is something which didn't go down well. Now, this wouldn't have been questioned by the earlier boards, but this is a different government, this is a different board, with people like Mr. Gurumurthy. They naturally think
who want a greater say in...
They say that, look, I mean, this is not done. You have to bring, these are very important decisions, you have to bring them to the board before passing them. So that was the origin of the rift. And then it widened, and then
so basically what would have happened was the RBI governor would then only be someone who managed the day-to-day, but all major decisions would need to be taken to the board.
At least it has to be discussed by the board. That's the stated position of the government directors, the government about RBI.
Does that infringe on the RBI governor's ability to make decisions? Should he be allowed a certain amount of elbow room to make decisions as he feels?
It's a grey area. It's a grey area because RBI believes that it's the regulator. On certain issues, the board members are not in a position to appreciate the complexities of those issues, and the RBI is better placed.
Yes.
So board should be informed, but board should not have the last word. That is RBI's position.
Yes. The board is meant to be an advisor.
Correct.
Okay. So
I have a question.
Just 1 second. Let me bring in the rest of my panel. For Sunil Alag is also listening, founder chairman of SK Advisors. Mr. Alag, what is your stand on the RBI governor's resignation? What do you think it's going to cost India globally?
You know, as far as I'm concerned, as somebody said, it's sad, but just remember that in every country in the world, it's not necessary that you see eye to eye, and a healthy discussion is always welcome. But in case there is a standoff, one party has to wilt. Now, if you're thinking Mr. Modi was going to resign, forget it. It had to be the RBI governor. It is sad that it comes to that situation. But if it does, then you cannot have both parties coexisting. So one party has to go. The most important thing is that in the last 1 year, and I've been always saying it, I'm not as great an economist as many on your panel, but I'm still did my economics honors and everything else, and I find that it's the government's obsession with fiscal deficit of keeping it down at 3.2%, and the RBI's absolute dogmatic thing on keeping inflation is what has led to this. Everywhere, as Mr. Chidambaram said, don't compare situations. Today's situation is that we are a developing economy. So taking inflation up to 5 or 6% is no big deal. All developing economies have that. Taking your fiscal deficit up to 4% is no big deal. You need that. And all industries been clamoring for a clamping down of credit, which RBI has ensured, with not, allowing interest rates to keep on rising because of their obsession with inflation. So there was a lot of things happening in the macro and the micro management, which was not cohesive. That's all that I want to say. Look, it's not that Mr. Urjit Patel was right on everything and therefore we've got to really get into the situation and say, oh my God, we've lost someone who's brilliant and the government is right on whatever it is. It's both the parties which needed to see where is India going today, appreciating it. For instance, what he's gone and done, the RBI governor, which a lot of complaints have come in on, it's got nothing to do with the government, is that he has said anyone who doesn't pay any interest for 3 months should be declared an NPA. So I, as a party who's been paying interest for 10 years on time, run through a bit of a problem. According to the new RBI rules, everybody, make them NPA.
Mr. Alag, we could have discussions on specific decisions.
But no. Faye, you've heard everybody else saying a lot. But there were many things happening where the RBI governor failed India, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as industry is concerned. And you have to appreciate it. Okay. Here was a government trying to do things in a developing economy, and then you are in SEBI, you say no director can resign without giving the reason. And yet when an RBI governor says personal reasons, you accept it. That is why all this confusion is taking place. You have to now specify as a director of any company that you resign, why you are resigning. Why is it not being imposed on the RBI governor? There'll be no more debates like this then. You'll know exactly why he's resigning. I cannot resign from a company and say it's for personal reasons and get away with it. You have to give a specific reason. So please, you can carry on debating this till the cows come home. I can see everybody going after the RBI governor. I'm not for the government either. Yeah. But you have to understand what was happening. Okay. One party had to give way.
Right. Professor Mehrotra wants to respond to you. Just 1 second. Professor Mehrotra, go ahead, please.
Then you sit back.
Faye, I don't necessarily want to respond to Sunil. Let me make a few points, having listened to the other speakers. I think the matters came to a head when the government decided to increase the size of the Central Board of Directors. The Central Board of Directors has almost never had more than 11 or 12 members. Today, thanks to the increase in the numbers appointed or nominated by the central government, the number has gone up to 18. Now, the governor presides over the central board. There are at least a couple of deputy governors, and then there are 2 nominees who are secretaries of the Ministry of Finance, and then there are independent people who were mostly from the industry. But in the last few months, a number of people have been appointed by the government who were either chartered accountants or not, or director of a cooperative bank who retired. And, no one on the independent side, from the government side, was an economist of any standing. On the other hand, on the side of the RBI, there were people who were bankers and who were very highly regarded professional economists. Now, in that situation, it is clearly that the government was trying to fill up the board with its own nominees who were not even economists. So that means professional opinion was being countered by unprofessional opinion simply on behalf of the government. That's a serious problem. That is what is compromising the independence and the credibility of the Central Bank of India.
Well, we also have Aman Agarwal, Director of the Indian Institute of Finance. Aman Agarwal, thank you for joining us. My question to you is this. When you look at this now from the global markets point of view, does it hurt India's credibility? Will there be questions asked tomorrow morning about what this means with the GDP numbers, about what this means for India's credit rating? Does it hurt our credibility globally?
I'm enthused by the question which you've asked, because I remember going back 20 years back when Alan Greenspan was the governor of Federal Reserve Board, and he was not keeping up and he was supposed to retire and someone else to come up. One of the congressmen in the US said that if he goes off, we'll have to pull him out of the dead and put him on the chair. Are we looking at a central bank which is so dependent on one position? Is it run by one person, or is it run by a group of officials appointed from time to time to look after different activities? Is a question before us.
Professor Agarwal, you've misunderstood my question. Allow me to rephrase it.
Not of welcome note.
No, allow me to rephrase the question. My question is not, can we, will the departure of Urjit Patel, cut us at the knees? My question is, will a RBI governor leaving his position a year before his term ends in this manner hurt our credibility?
I'm coming to that again. That's what I was saying, Faye. Please understand that the Reserve Bank of India has not built its credibility because of A, B or C person. The credibility of Reserve Bank of India in the last 80 years has been built because of its doing, of its independent decisions, of the way it has been able to run and manage this country and the monetary policy of this country for the last 80 years. Are we doubting that policy framework or that system which has been established in the last 80 years because of A or B or C coming and going into the system? I think that is an important question. We are making hitches
would you rebut that? All right, allow me to bring in rebuttals.
Which has happened.
Allow me to bring in. Is that a fair thing to say?
Well, it's just not the exit, because when Raghuram Rajan left, he also left on an acrimonious note. And there was a widely shared perception that billions will flow out after Rajan goes.
Yes.
It never happened.
Yes.
So possibly that had emboldened the present government. At the same time, it is not the departure or the exit which is important. It is how are you trying to change RBI? If there are structural changes in RBI where those changes are perceived would make the RBI less independent, that is where the worry is.
Vinay, again, from the point of view of everyone looking at this externally, of course, it's true what Sunil Alak said. We don't know what the real reasons are. They're not mandated to put it in the resignation. But this does seem like all is not well. And that is a message that will trickle down to every Indian.
Yes, so I'll just pick up from Aman's logic where he said that, it can't be, how can you have one person determining the outcome of a whole economic might of a nation? And I agree with him. But I don't look at it, I do not want to analyze this in terms of whether Urjit Patel had a problem or not. This, for me, is the fifth person in a series of instances over the last year and a half or so, where experts, economists have disagreed or found some reason to disagree and have walked out of the job that they were given to by the government. Now, that's a pattern. One could be an exception, it could be a reason, it could be an isolated example.
So there was Raghuram Rajan, there was Arvind Panagra of the Niti Aayog, there was Arvind Subramaniam of who was the economic advisor, the chief economic advisor to the government of India, and now there's Urjit Patel.
And now Urjit Patel. So when you have a pattern, then it tells you that there is a way and a method in which the government operates. And clearly that method and way of operation is not going down well with technocrats who will very often have a disagreement. And I'm also saying so because this government before 2014, when it was campaigning and when they finally came to power, had actually given a lot of hope to people, including at the time of cabinet formation, that even the cabinet will have technocrats. And that actually was a breath of fresh air, because there is a long-standing view amongst many that you need experts to run ministries as well. I'm not one of those who subscribe to the view necessarily. You may not necessarily make a great minister.
Wasn't this also the same government, Vinay, who said that hard work is better than Harvard? And there was a certain amount of sarcasm
and I
towards
kind of agree with that. I don't think
just
because somebody is a good economist, this necessarily becomes a good minister. I don't agree, because you need political experience to actually handle ministry. So I do understand that. But I'm just saying that for me, Urjit Patel is the fifth instance of something which has been happening for a while, which tells you that there is something wrong in the way things are being managed in so far as the economy is concerned.
Well, Mohan Guruswamy, do you want to respond to what Aman Agarwal said? Do you agree now with what Vinay Tiwari is saying, which is that Urjit Patel's exit is a symptom of a larger problem that we have in the country right now?
Of course, it's a symptom of a larger problem. Was anybody really surprised that the RBI has lost a governor? Not really, because this was happening for the last few weeks. They'd made the position of the man untenable. If he had to continue as governor of RBI, then he would have become the chairman of a board-managed company. When the RBI is not intended to be a company in the real sense of the word. The RBI is supposed to function as an institution. And so there it was coming, because if anybody wanted to defend the RBI, the only way to defend the RBI at this stage was to run into the sword. And which he did. I think it's a very gallant gesture that, you want to take over. The government at the end of the day can always invoke the law and take over the RBI and do whatever it wants with it.
Right. Sunil Alak?
I think he's put a stop to that process right now with this action.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sunil Alak.
No, I agree with Aman to the extent that no economists are going to agree on the issue. But look, he was there in the RBI. Urjit Patel was there for 10 years. He knew exactly what he was as a deputy governor, and then he went into everything and he became a governor. He's gone through GST and everything else. So for 10 years, that man doesn't say anything. And then suddenly in the last 1 year, there is a dispute. Look, I am not taking away from the autonomy of the RBI governor. He should always have it. So the question is, when the board meets, the board is supposed to advise. And is the RBI governor going to be like a dictator and say, I'm not going to listen to the board. I don't care what you say. I'm going to do this. Are you wanting an RBI governor like that? No. At the same time, do you want it to be a board run? No. So you must understand what Urjit Patel and all, unless he explains, he was being very dogmatic. He was just not ready to listen to anyone. I am right kind of the approach. So it's a question of when the government and he clash like this, one person has to go. Which guy will go? I mean, it's an obvious answer. So I don't think it's going to affect anyone.
Allow me, and while we get Professor Mehrotra back on the line.
Who comes in, and as Mohan said, as Mohan says, we got to watch who the new RBI governor is and what kind of a role he plays. That will determine whether the RBI is still independent or not.
Well, I just want to point out one thing, Mr. Alak. A lot of the previous RBI governors have noted, like I pointed out in the beginning of the show, there are disagreements between Finance Minister and RBI governor because they're both looking after different things. One of them is looking after the monetary policy and the other is looking after the, the financial policy of the country. But it is the responsibility of the finance minister to convince the RBI governor, because the RBI governor and his team are best placed to make these decisions. And if you're unable to convince the RBI governor, then you are unable to actually, which means that you aren't able to make a very sound argument for your decision. Secondly, I don't think it's fair to say that the RBI governor wants to function like a dictator, because he does have an entire team of advisors within the RBI who are meant to advise him. So it's not like he's sitting there like a king making decisions on a whim, is he? Sagar?
Yeah, but it's not a black and white issue, because over the last few years,
I think they've tried to convince him. He's not being convinced. 1 second. Can I just finish the answer that, look, they tried to convince him. He's not being convinced. Now what? Now what? What is the suggestion over here?
No, I think over the last few years,
now what do you do?
The failures of RBI, whether it's on the monetary policy front, it went wrong in forecasting inflation, liquidity. Now, these failures and some of the regulatory decision directives have weakened RBI.
Yes.
And that's where the government moved in. And being a strong government, it put in people who are extraordinarily vocal. They came out and started talking about RBI balance sheet. Now, the situation flared up.
Well, Professor Mehrotra, I'm told that we have your audio back again. I apologize for for that audio in the middle of the show. But Professor Mehrotra, here are the arguments. On one hand, Sunil Alak says that if there is a disagreement between the RBI governor and the finance minister, then obviously the one that needs to go is the RBI governor, and he should not be allowed to function like a dictator. Would you want to respond to that?
First of all, I don't believe he was even attempting to behave like a dictator. I thought in the last few weeks after the November 19th board meeting, things had begun to improve. But the point is that, I mean, wouldn't an intelligent man like Urjit Patel know that he cannot function like a regulator? He is merely the rank of a cabinet secretary. I mean, this government has actually reduced the level the rank of a RBI governor from that of a minister of state to a cabinet secretary rank person. Anyway, the point here is that it is so obvious from so many decisions that this government does not like high-quality professionals and high-quality technocrats, and certainly doesn't like economists in their job. Because otherwise, how do you explain the RBI board being filled with people who don't have any economics background? If differences of opinion arise between, bankers and economists from the side of the RBI and non-economists and bureaucrats on the other side, and, people who are nominees of the government, I mean, what is likely to be the outcome? What is likely to be the outcome? It is obvious that a government which is about to face elections in 6 months is trying to ensure that, NBFCs get money, that MSMEs get money, but that means that the PCA, the Prompt Corrective Action Framework, which Urjit had brought the banks under, and which had begun to have effect. The banks' condition was improving. The banks had begun to lend. But you see, everything that the captain of the Reserve Bank was attempting to do was being second-guessed, was being questioned. Now, why do you think the MSMEs are not getting as much loan and the NBFC situation has come to this pass? It has come to this pass because of the demonetization decision of the government of India. The government of India's demonetization knocked the bottom out of the informal sector and the MSME sector. And they lost jobs and they lost profits, and the badly managed and implemented GST also damaged the informal sector and the MSMEs. The result is that now the government is hoping to revive the situation in respect of NBFCs and MSMEs.
All right. Let me just... Yes.
But sir, isn't it strange?
The trussle. Faye,
yes, just 1 second. Go ahead. Sugata, go ahead.
No, but Professor Mehrotra, isn't it strange that a governor who agreed and endorsed demonetization actually deferred on PCA, which is a far simpler issue?
He had no choice. I'm sorry.
No, but if he had no choice, then why does he have a choice today?
He had just been appointed 2 months earlier. I'm sorry, I'm certain that he wouldn't have agreed as a professional. He had no choice. He had just been appointed. There were 4 people in the whole country who knew about the demonetization decision. It was something that was presented to him as a fait accompli. No professional in his right mind would ever support a decision like the demonetization.
No, but then the question that we must ask Professor Agarwal is that if he at that point had no choice, how does he have a choice now?
I need to give a chance to oppose all these points which has been...
Yes, and Bhaskar Ghosh, here's my question to you. Can the government at this point deny the embarrassment that comes with this resignation? The political embarrassment that will come with this resignation for not having been able to manage this relationship?
First of all, there is no political embarrassment as such. This government, the growth in different sectors for this government, right from industrial growth to GDP to other index of growth is so high, so the Reserve Bank, being a regulator, has to keep up with the pace of the growth the government has really achieved. And if today any governor, within bracket with personal reasons, he stepped down, that means he is not able to take the challenges what government has given or government has achieved. Now the question is this government, Dr. Patel in 2014, when he has 2016, sorry, demonetization, he has open-handedly or very, very aggressively supported the demonetizations. And now my fellow panelists are saying demonetization is a failure or it is in reckless affairs. But he must understand, because of demonetization, the tax collections to different adversities of the last government have been taken care of. If he is not taken care of, this economy is about to collapse. Now the question is that today... Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Arvind Subramanian said something else.
So today there could be, I'm not ruling out, there could be difference of opinion between the government and governor. But that is not that words that the government should resign. And just before 1 year back, because the government is going to for an poll.
No, hang on. Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh, first of all, I have a couple of rebuttals for you. Your argument on growth that the government has brought that the RBI should keep up with. Former economic advisor to the Prime Minister, Arvind Subramaniam, has just today said we should brace for an economic slowdown because the financial sector is not doing well and the agricultural sector is not doing well. The GDP numbers are still being debated across the country because we've changed the measures so many times. But let me just read this out before I bring in the rest of the panel. This is a statement now from former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, who I'll remind you was also former Finance Minister and former RBI Governor. He says, and I quote, "It is with great sadness that I have received the news of the resignation of the RBI Governor Urjit Patel. I have known Dr. Patel to be an economist of very high repute and someone who cared deeply about India's financial institutions and economic policy. Dr. Patel's sudden resignation at a time when India's economy is facing many headwinds is very unfortunate and a severe blow to the nation's economy. There have been apprehensions expressed earlier by the Deputy Governor of the RBI about the government's intent to rapid capital reserves of the RBI for financial purposes, to raid the capital reserves, I beg your pardon, of the RBI for fiscal purposes. I hope the resignation of the governor is not a sign that this may soon become a reality. Building institutions have taken a long time and effort, and they can be destroyed with a whimper. It is institutions such as the RBI and many others that have served as the edifice of our great nation's progress since independence. It would be foolhardy to diminish these institutions for short-term political gains." Your response to this, Sugata?
Well, I mean,
let's take the political aspect of it into consideration.
Well, there was no unanimity on who will head this panel in deciding the economic capital. That was that was another reason between the rift. Yes. I mean, that was another reason which was brewing. The other thing, the political aspect, is that, as I said earlier, that the outcome of the elections will determine the stand the government takes, the kind of RBI governor it picks.
Yes. Yes, Vinay, this bit that he has noticed, Dr. Singh has mentioned that the government's intent to raid capital reserves of the RBI for fiscal purposes, and I hope that this resignation is not a sign that that might become a reality. This is something you mentioned in the beginning, something that perhaps going into the elections is, we should keep an eye on, because how much elbow room does this government have to make big bang announcements in the next budget or in the next session?
Yes, and I think for an economist, Dr. Manmohan Singh's comment is a rather political one, because he's read the winds quite well in many ways. And I think one part, of course, and I can almost be certain that this exit poll that came in day before yesterday has sent some amount of worry to the government. Whether that worry turns into panic tomorrow after the results or not, we don't know. But remember, there is almost a unanimous view that it's going to be 1-0 against them. This election is important for them for the simple reason that all the three states are agrarian states. You have 70% agrarian population there, and it's a contiguous landmass. So between Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, it's actually a contiguous landmass. Every state connects each other. The borders are shared. And I think they realize that there is a problem they're staring at. To fix this problem, or at least to make the problem look lesser, you have to give doles. There is no other way out. And I think Dr. Manmohan Singh's worry is coming from there, that the government is perhaps preparing itself for a situation where, in the face of an adverse electoral result tomorrow, they might have to come out with some very big bang announcements ahead of 1st of February. Even before, because the budget is going to be a small budget, I'm assuming. It's not going to be the main one. But I'm sure they're going to do it as an outer policy measure.
Faye.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Professor Mehrotra, go ahead.
Oi, signal gaya.
We can hear you. Go. Okay, I'm not sure if he can hear us. Okay, all right, we've lost that connection. Last word to Mohan Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, your reaction to Dr. Manmohan Singh's statement?
Well, I suspect that the government has got something up its sleeves. If the election results are not good tomorrow, then they'll really have to pull out all the rabbits they can, and let's see what happens. I think one big rabbit is already out. The RSS was out in strength yesterday in Delhi, putting the Ram temple on firmly on the agenda, and so that is going to be certainly one part of it. And the economics which go with the RSS philosophy will be the other part of it. We'll have to see what kind of mumbo jumbo they come out with. We already have had some feel of this, a new nationalistic economic regime where all capital will be ingrown, gold is there, to be had from the people of India and all that stuff, all that will come out now. Because this is an act of desperation then by a desperate government. What does it do to hang on? And it has to offer people somebody. And you see, mind you, electoral defeat will also make the Prime Minister weak, which means that the RSS then firmly gets the upper hand.
Okay, so all right, we'll leave it just at the analysis of what's happening with the RBI, but this we know for sure that the market, when it opens tomorrow morning, is not going to be kind to this information. We're looking at the currency markets, and the rupee has already lost about 1.61% in the currency markets globally, and it's weakened against the dollar already since the announcement came in. Plus the election results that the market will have to digest tomorrow. The question that we have to ask in conclusion is, as regular citizens of this country who are perhaps not directly impacted by what the RBI is doing or what's happening between the Finance Ministry and the RBI, how does this affect us? Well, it affects us simply for this reason. The RBI protects our interest on a long-term point of view. Remember, you and I work. We have money that's cut out of our salaries that goes into our provident fund, our PF deduction, that stays there for 20 years. We put money in fixed deposits, we put money in homes and home loans that we access. We invest for decades. We earn our money, which is with the signature of the RBI on it, on the explicit understanding that governments may come and go, but our earnings, our savings and our investments and our money will always remain the same. That politics or short-term T20 decisions made by any government, not just this one but the previous ones, will not affect the long-term value of our money. That protection is given to us by the RBI, and the RBI needs to necessarily stay independent of the government in order to be able to give us that protection, because the RBI will make decisions it believes are good from a long-term point of view, from a test match sort of point of view. And this resignation dents that image that the RBI is able to stay independent. So it's going to be important for the government of India to not only manage how the stock market and the global markets see India post this resignation, but to also manage who will come in after this and how independent that governor will be. Thanks for watching.